Everything you were taught about where religion came from is wrong. Not slightly wrong, completely wrong. And once you hear the real story, you'll never look at human history the same way again. Because religion didn't begin in a church or a temple or a moment of divine revelation. It began in darkness, in fear. In the mind of a human being who looked at the world around them and couldn't explain what they were seeing. And what happened next set in motion the most powerful force in the entire history of our species. Imagine you are an early human, standing at the edge of a forest 70,000 years ago, watching the sky do something terrifying. Lightning splits the darkness, thunder shakes the ground beneath your feet, and you have absolutely no framework for what you are witnessing. All you know, in the deepest part of your body, is that something out there is impossibly powerful, and it does not care about you. That feeling, that raw mixture of awe and terror and smallness, is the seed of every religion that has ever existed on this planet. And here is what most people get wrong. They assume it started with faith, with someone deciding to believe in something they couldn't see. But it didn't start there. It started with questions, the same questions that still keep people awake at night. Why does the sun rise and set? Why do people we love get sick and die? Why did something terrible happen when I did nothing wrong? Early humans weren't primitive. Their brains were essentially identical to yours. They were asking the exact same things you ask. They just had no data to answer them with. And here's what human brains do when they have no data. They fill the gap. Psychologists call it agent detection. Our brains are wired to assume that when something happens, something caused it. A twig snaps in the dark forest and your brain doesn't calmly suggest it was probably the wind. It screams predator. Because the cost of being wrong one way is embarrassment, and the cost of being wrong the other way is death. So, we evolved to see agency everywhere, faces in clouds, intention in storms, a will behind the chaos. It became religion. The oldest religious acts we know of date back 300,000 years, and they are burial rituals. Early humans carefully placing their dead in the ground, covering them with ochre and tools and flowers. You don't go to that trouble if you believe the person has simply stopped existing. You believe the story isn't over. Then 40,000 years ago, an explosion of symbolic thinking. Cave paintings appear across Europe and Asia. Figurines are carved from bone and stone. Ritual objects suggest early humans were trying to communicate with forces beyond themselves. This is prayer in its most ancient form. Objects and offerings, the same impulse that fills churches and mosques today. Then came agriculture, and everything changes. Hunter-gatherers had local spirits, but farming led to cities. Thousands of strangers were living side by side and needing to cooperate. Cooperation at that scale requires shared belief. Religion became the original social contract. Why trust a stranger? Because we worship the same God. The first temples appear. Priests emerge as a profession, managing the relationship between humanity and the divine. The great ancient religions, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Vedic, Chinese, all rise. They are the entire operating framework of civilization. Then comes the axial age. Across multiple civilizations with no contact, something shifts in how humans think about the divine. Confucius is teaching. The Buddha is meditating. Zoroaster is preaching. The Hebrew prophets are writing. Socrates and Plato are philosophizing. Independently arrive at the idea that religion is about becoming a better person. Ethics and inner transformation enter the picture. The radical suggestion that the divine isn't only out there in the storm, but in here, in how you treat others. Almost every major religion alive today has its roots in this moment, when humanity decided morality and spirituality belong together. Islam arrives in the 7th century, spreading from Spain to Central Asia, becoming one of the most transformative forces in history. Then the printing press shatters the church's monopoly. The Reformation fractures Christianity. The Enlightenment arrives. And for the first time, it becomes socially acceptable in the Western world to say out loud, maybe none of this is true. And yet here we are. 8 billion people on Earth, and roughly 6 billion of them identify with a religion that is not a relic of ignorance. That is the most durable, most persistent idea in the entire history of our species. Which raises the question, why, with no proof, do so many people still believe? Stay with us. The answer will surprise you. You just heard where religion came from. Now here is the question that nobody seems to be able to answer satisfactorily: why? In a world of science and technology and more information than any human being in history has ever had access to, do 6 billion people still believe in something they cannot prove? The answer isn't what you think. And it says something about human beings that we don't often like to admit. Let's put something on the table right away, because it's the question that sits underneath this entire conversation. If science has not proven the existence of God, or gods, or an afterlife, or a soul, there is no peer-reviewed study confirming that prayer changes outcomes, that consciousness survives death, or that the universe was set in motion. That is simply true, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. Yet 6 billion people believe, including, by the way, some of the most brilliant scientific minds in history. Francis Collins, who led the project that mapped the entire human genome, is a devout Christian. Georges Lemaitre, the physicist who first proposed the Big Bang, was a Catholic priest. The absence of proof has not settled the matter. Understanding why tells us something genuinely profound about what it means to be human. Start with the psychological case. Human beings are, as far as we know, the only animals on Earth who are fully aware that they are going to die. We don't just sense danger, we carry the knowledge of our own mortality with us every single day. Terror management theory argues that human behavior is shaped by our need to manage the terror of knowing we are temporary. We build monuments and have children and create art because we are trying to matter beyond our own brief existence. Religion is the most elegant solution to that terror ever invented. It tells you that your life has cosmic significance right now. You are not a random arrangement of atoms. You are known. You are loved by something vast and permanent. You are part of a story that began before you were born and continues long after you die. That is everything to a person. A skeptic will say, but it isn't true. A comforting story is still just a story. And that's a fair point. But here's where things get genuinely complicated. What is the psychological alternative? Albert Camus called it the absurd, the gap between our hunger for meaning and the universe's complete silence. His conclusion was that you can live beautifully anyway, that you can create your own meaning with courage and joy. It's also hard. It requires a kind of resilience that is a lot to ask of someone who is also grieving a loss. Religion hands you the framework pre-assembled, and for billions of people, that framework works. Religious people report higher life satisfaction, lower depression, and greater resilience in the face of crisis. Is that because their beliefs are true, or because community and meaning are good for humans? Debate continues. Which brings us to community. Church, a mosque, a synagogue are not just buildings. They're institutions that gather people across generations around a shared identity, are born, married, and buried within it. The same people who celebrated your wedding are the ones who show up with food when someone dies. In an era where loneliness is a public health crisis, that kind of sustained human belonging is profound. When people leave religion, they report missing the people, the rituals, the feeling of being held by something larger. Then there is religious experience itself. Surveys find that 30 to 50% of people report having had a mystical experience, a sudden, overwhelming sense of unity with everything, feeling of presence, of being met by something. Neuroscience can map the neural activity, but explaining the mechanism doesn't dissolve the experience. If you tell someone that the most profound moment of their life was just a pattern of brain activity, they will ask, what is love then? The reductive explanation touches the machinery, but leaves the meaning completely intact. For millions, these experiences are the foundation of their faiths, something that happened to them personally that they cannot unhave. And finally, consider what religion does. It takes the hardest moments, death, guilt, the feeling of failure, and gives them a place to go. It offers ritual for grief, so that loss has shape and community rather than just silence. It offers confession and absolution, the staggering idea that you can be genuinely forgiven through grace. Theologians call it grace, and it is one of the most psychologically potent concepts in human history. Why do billions still believe? Because the need that religion meets was never a logical need in the first place. It is a human need, the need to not be utterly alone in an indifferent universe. The need for your suffering to point towards something rather than nothing, the need to belong to a story bigger than yourself. Whether or not a God exists, that need is real. It has always been real. And as long as humans are mortal and meaning-hungry, religion will exist alongside them. Thanks for watching. Stay curious.